So in this session, we will discuss the basic introduction of nonlinear analysis and how it is different from linear analysis. So why we need nonlinear analysis? We know already that linear elastic analysis may be wrong sometime when our buildings are subjected to uh, severe ground shaking and our structure is expected to go into an elastic range. In that case, linear elastic analysis will be wrong. So buildings do not respond as linearly elastic systems during strong ground shaking. Nonlinear analysis also give us an improved understanding of structural behavior, more accurate prediction of global displacements, and similarly we can more realistically predict the earthquake demands and individual component level, more reliable identification of bad actors. What are some of the members which are not actually performing satisfactorily, and what are those elements which are actually having some undesirable failure modes, for example. All of those can be identified using nonlinear analysis. Linear analysis doesn't have the capability to simulate any failure. It will not tell you any failure. Nonlinear analysis and nonlinear modeling will actually give you that uh, actual information about those bad actors. Reduce impact and cost of seismic retrofit. Obviously, if you uh, actual actually carry out a retrofit analysis using linear modeling and linear analysis, it may cost you more if you, for example, carry out the nonlinear analysis, because in that case you can use less conservative acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is a term which I will be using again and again. It simply means the values of different capacities which will be used to compare with the demand. For example, the strains, material strain will be defined in acceptance criteria as IO, LS and CP values. So there will be three different values at three different performance levels serving as the acceptance criteria. So it is the criteria which will be acceptable. For example, if the demand strain is let's say 0.0025 and in certain material, and that value is in between IU and LS, then we will say that the material itself is uh, in between these two performance levels. And let's say that if our criteria for acceptance is that the material should remain uh, below LS level, then we say that okay, this performance level is passed already because the demand value is less than LS. So that's why it is called acceptance criteria. The values, basically these are capacities. So the word capacity and acceptance criteria are sometimes interchangeably used. But capacity now will be a different number for different performance levels. So capacity of a material will be one number for IO, one number for LS and one number for CP. So generally they are marked on the actual load deformation behavior, or in this case if you are talking about a material actual stress strain behavior, they are marked on that, and then you can actually see that your demand value lies where in comparison to these three numbers. So you can use different acceptance criteria for the design of a new building, and you can use a less conservative acceptance criteria if you want to perform the seismic retrofit of an existing building, for example. And similarly, you can uh, have some other benefits also, some other you can say useful applications of nonlinear analysis also in performance assessment of existing building. So and obviously this is state of the art now. Nowadays, if you want to carry out nonlinear, if you want to carry out performance based seismic design, you have to perform nonlinear analysis for that at MCE level ground motion. In some cases, linear elastic analysis may give you inaccurate results. For example, deflections uh, may be too small as predicted by elastic analysis. In some cases, the force values are too small. For example, in the settlement support settlement problems, the forces or moments, as predicted by the linear analysis, are often uh, the traditional elastic analysis often overestimates the moments caused by the support settlement. So in some cases, the forces may be overestimated. In some cases, the displacements may be overestimated. So therefore, you need nonlinear analysis. The decision to use nonlinear analysis should be based from a need that cannot be satisfied by merely the linear approximation. So if the linear approximation doesn't work at a certain level for a certain structure, for a certain type of applied loading, then you should go for nonlinear analysis. So we will see certain cases and how it is different from linear analysis in next few slides. Uh, when you should use linear analysis, or what are some of the conditions for linearity? If the stress strain relationship are in linear range for all the materials, so elastic modulus will remain constant. In that case, the structure is linear. If the deformations and rotation are small, plane section remain plane. In that case, you can use linear analysis. And if the magnitude, orientation, and direction of the applied loading is not changing, you may still use linear analysis. So these are some of the conditions of linearity, or some cases where linear analysis may still be okay. But if you experience any of these symptoms which I am going to introduce next, in that case you should go for nonlinear analysis. So these are some of the symptoms of nonlinear behavior. For example, the very first symptom is that at material level, the stresses approach to the yield point of that material. So most materials exhibit a significant range of nonlinear elastic behavior long before the yield stress is reached. So if a certain material have this kind of a stress strain curve, and if the applied loading is not taking it up to the yield point, it has the nonlinear elastic behavior. It may still follow the same line, whether linear or nonlinear, but it will come back to the original unstressed condition. But when the material is strained beyond its proportional limit, in that case the stress strain curve is no longer linear, and then this will become your first symptom of nonlinear behavior. And one more important point is that sometimes the maximum stress approaching, which is exceeding the yield point, may be highly localized. The maximum stresses are highly localized in some cases, which means that only part of the total structure is beyond yield point. Most part of the structure may not go beyond yield point. In those some cases also, those highly stressed components can redistribute those high stresses to all the other elements which are around it. So if this is the case, that only maybe one or two components yielded in a particular structure, in that case also we may still be it may still be okay to use linear analysis. But if we have several elements which are going beyond yield point, and the inelastic phenomena is not localized anymore, in that case we go for nonlinear analysis. It needs engineering judgment and expertise, because before performing the analysis you may not actually know which element is going to yield, or will I be expecting nonlinear behavior or not. So it's a matter of engineering judgment also. It may be possible that you construct a nonlinear computer model, carry out nonlinear analysis, but after the analysis you come to know that your applied loading was so low, or your ground shaking was so low, that none of your elements which can yield have actually yielded. So the structure as a whole just remain in the linear range, or just one or two elements yielded which doesn't affect the overall behavior. So in that case all of your effort which you put in actually carrying out nonlinear modeling and analysis will not be used. A linear analysis would give you the same results which you got from nonlinear analysis, because none of your element have actually yielded. So again, it will be a matter of judgment. If you have excessive deformations, if you have, for example, coupled displacements, for example, if you have certain nodes in a computer model which have coupled displacements, let's say that I say that this node and this node should actually move together, their displacement should be coupled. In such a case where you have a structure which have very which is largely constrained, it may have more nonlinear behavior compared to a lightly constrained structure. So the degree of nonlinearity due to displacements will be small in a lightly constrained case and larger as the constraint restricts the natural movement of the building. So for example, if a structure have so many restraints, so many coupled displacements, for example, if I forcefully say that the displacement of this node should be 0, all 6 degrees of freedom, which means fixed support, compared to a structure where I don't apply fixed support here. So in that case, a structure which has a fixed support there is expected to go into more nonlinear range compared to the one which doesn't have that support. So whenever you actually constrain the displacement, you constrain different nodes to have same displacement, or you restrain a particular uh, displacement by giving them some idealized support condition. In these cases, you may expect a high degree of nonlinearity compared to if you don't restrict the natural movement of that structure. So these are some of the symptoms, or you can say uh, how you can actually identify that you may expect nonlinear behavior as a result of applied loading. How these linear and nonlinear problems are different. Just quickly go through that because we have discussed that already. We know that in linear problems, the displacement and force relationship is always linear forever. Any force, any deformation corresponding to that. Force deformation behavior will be linear, whether it is stress strain, whether it is moment curvature, moment rotation, shear force, shear deformation, torque, twist, and whatever. Nonlinear problems, obviously the load displacement relationships are usually nonlinear. So it's not that we make all components or all behavior as nonlinear. Some selected behavior, for example, flexural behavior, shear behavior, may be made nonlinear. So the force deformation behavior in this case is nonlinear. Stress strain relationship, material level behavior, it is linear. Here it has a nonlinear behavior. And it's the nonlinearity is not just between force and stress and strain. In this case, the stress strain curve itself is modified because of certain other factors also. For example, initial stress in a certain material, you start the stress from zero level, or there was some initial stress also. There may be some temperature effect on the stress strain curve of material, and some other factors also which modifies this behavior. In linear analysis, we cannot account for all of those behavior. So not only we account for the nonlinearity between stresses and strains, we can also account for some special phenomena also in nonlinear problems. The displacement magnitude, changes in geometry due to displacement are assumed to be small and hence ignored. So we actually consider undeformed shape. We take the equilibrium of the structure in the undeformed shape. But actually, we know that when the structure deforms, its geometry is modified. So now the equilibrium should be actually considered in the deformed configuration of the structure and not in the undeformed configuration of a structure. If you have a frame which is subjected to one vertical load P and one horizontal load H, now you can just take a section from that and apply equilibrium principle to actually calculate everything in that frame. But now imagine that because of that applied loading, the frame has displaced already. Let's say that now it is changed to this deformed shape because of the applied loading. And now the H and P, these two forces, are at a new location and not at the undeformed condition. So the equilibrium should be actually applied at the deformed shape, and all the modified geometry should be used. Deformed geometry should be used in all the calculations. But in generally in the linear problems, we ignore that. We use the undeformed shape for all the calculations. But in the nonlinear problems, we may use the deformed shape also. If we use that, it is called large displacement analysis, and that I will discuss when I discuss the geometric nonlinearity. So this will be under geometric nonlinearity because the geometry of the structure is modified and now that is used to actually apply equilibrium. Material properties obviously will be linear elastic and easy to obtain. So stress strain curve, you just need one number to define a material, E, and maybe Poisson ratio also. But for nonlinear material properties, you have to actually define the full stress strain curve, and that is not very easy to obtain. Maybe you need to carry out certain tests and then you can get that behavior and then you can provide it as an input. Another feature of the nonlinear problem is that it is reversibility. The behavior of the structure is completely reversible in linear case upon removal of the external loads. So behavior will simply reverse and come back to original configuration and original stress state. But the nonlinear problem will not be like that. Upon removal of the external loads, the final state may be different from the initial state. So this is one major feature of nonlinear problem or nonlinear analysis. Boundary conditions remain unchanged in case of linear throughout the analysis, but for nonlinear case, it may be different. For example, a change in the contact area, a structure if it is in contact with some certain area, during the analysis, nonlinear analysis, that contact area may change. So the nonlinear analysis have the capability to actually simulate that change in the contact area also. This is not the case with linear analysis. The loading sequence is not important in linear cases. If you have, let's say, two forces, one is small, one is large, and the structure is linear. So if you apply first the small force F1, the structure follow linear line, and then after that you apply a big force F2. The structure will still follow linear line and the final point will be same. Whether you apply F2 first and then F1 or F1 first and then F2, in both cases you will finally reach to the same point in case of linear analysis. But this is not true in nonlinear analysis because the relationship between F and U or F and displacement is nonlinear now. So if you apply first, for example, the big force, the large force, that may result in the yielding of structure, and then the application of even the small force F1 may significantly cause, may significant have significant displacements. So, so the order of the application of force matters in case of nonlinear analysis. So in the behavior of a structure may depend on the load history, but in linear case it may not depend. The load is applied in just one load step with no iterations. We will see later that the nonlinear analysis is iterative. It is not just one step process. Linear analysis where you have just this equation F is equal to KU, you just apply all the force in one step, directly calculate U. But in the nonlinear analysis, you apply the load in small increments and different iterations are performed to ensure that the equilibrium is satisfied at every load increment. So as we have seen either in nonlinear static or nonlinear dynamic analysis, the process is iterative. You apply force or nonlinear loading in nonlinear analysis into small increments. The computation time for linear analysis is small. and because of the load increments and iterations, the computation time is high in case of nonlinear analysis. Uh, the solution can easily be obtained with no iteration interaction from the user. Uh, there is no convergence issue. The solution is robust. But in difficult nonlinear problems, the finite element code may fail to converge without some interaction from the user. So user may provide some guidance to the solver. It may provide some help to the solver in some decisions which user have to take. For example, number of load steps, the tolerance values for iterations, and some other factors or other uh, parameters which user have to provide according to his understanding of the size of the problem, and that is required for nonlinear problems. The superposition and scaling allow results to be factored and combined as required. For example, if I say that the dead load have produced this much moment mu, 1.6 dead load will simply produce 1.6 times mu. So I can simply, because the problem is linear, everything is simply scaled by, you can say, certain factor. So it means that I can simply superpose different loads. Dead load can simply be added to live load. For example, if dead load is producing mu1 moment, live load is producing mu2 moment. So the load combination dead plus live will simply result in producing a moment of mu1 plus mu2. So therefore, we don't need to carry out analysis for load combinations. We can simply carry out analysis for the separate load cases and then combine the results with different load factors, because that superposition is possible in linear analysis. But this factoring and combining of results is not possible for nonlinear analysis. You cannot simply add the results of different load cases to get the combined results of combinations. So this is not possible, or this is not correct in nonlinear analysis. The initial state of stress or strain is unimportant, but the results of nonlinear analysis may be significantly affected by the initial state of stress or strain that is usually required for material nonlinearity problems. So now, after discussing these major differences between linear analysis and nonlinear analysis, now let's discuss the types of nonlinearity. There are three types of nonlinearity: material nonlinearity, which you are already familiar with. It is due to inelastic behavior of the constituent materials, for example, concrete and steel. There are certain inelastic phenomena associated with their behavior. For example, cracking, crushing, sliding, yielding. They all may occur when the strains are beyond the yield point. The second type is the geometric nonlinearity, and this is due to the change in the shape of the structure. Why it is a nonlinearity, I will explain in next few slides. But it arises because the deformed shape of the structure also has an effect on the behavior, and this behavior is actually geometric nonlinearity. It has two major analysis types. One is called the P delta analysis, another is called the large displacement analysis. So we will discuss that in more detail, because for material nonlinearity you are already familiar with. This geometric nonlinearity, I have few slides to discuss that. There can be nonlinear boundary conditions also, or sometimes also called as boundary nonlinearity. For example, some springs can be used to actually model certain support, and the behavior of those springs can be nonlinear. For example, if this is a column and it has a certain, for example, support or foundation, and this is supported on some soil which is represented by some soil springs, the behavior of these springs can be nonlinear. The force deformation behavior or axial force, axial deformation behavior can be nonlinear for these springs also. In that case, it will become a nonlinear boundary condition. It may be, for example, there are some special elements. If you want to, like for example, model the behavior of a rocking wall. For example, if this is a wall which may rock at the base. Rocking wall is a wall which can be lifted from one side when applied to when applied with the horizontal loading. So the wall may actually lift from one side, and then it can also come back to its original position because there is a certain energy dissipating bars coming from foundation to that wall. But you actually allow it to lift from one side and then also allow it to lift from the other side when the loading is reversed. This is called rocking wall. Now this kind of a boundary condition at the base will be non-linear because you have to actually model the contact between foundation and the wall. This is wall. And the area of contact is different at different time instants. So if you are actually you want to model that the contact between wall and foundation which is varying in time, that will be boundary nonlinearity. And also that contact will be uh, basically the foundation is not allowing, it is supporting only in one direction. When the wall want to lift up, foundation is not stopping it, unlike the, for example, fixed support. So this kind of a behavior is non-linear, and it can be that kind of non-linearity will be accounted if you use non-linear boundary conditions. So if the material non-linearity is accounted, one or both of the other two types will also be required in many cases. So material nonlinearity, you are already familiar with that material behaves in a nonlinear manner if it is stressed beyond a certain yield point. Concrete's actual behavior is nonlinear right from start in compression, but we can actually idealize it to have a linear behavior in the start and then nonlinear. In tension side, it have linear behavior and then sudden failure. The behavior of concrete can also be altered significantly by confinement. The confined concrete will have a significantly improved behavior compared to unconfined concrete. So if you are defining the nonlinearity right at material level, you will account automatically the effects associated with different material failures. You will automatically account the effect of confinement by modifying the stress strain curve which is given as an input in the nonlinear analysis, and also some other material failures. For example, the compression failure is at a certain level, but tension failure is just maybe 10% or 15% of that level, that you will automatically account if you give this whole curve as an input. Then the cyclic behavior of that material can also be defined and given as an input, which will capture many aspects of material nonlinearity, both for steel as well as concrete. So you will not only provide this monotonic stress strain curve, which will capture some strain hardening, some other aspects, but also the cyclic behavior. That also will account certain aspects. So material nonlinearity is when the material is exceeded, is stressed beyond the yield point. But the geometric nonlinearity has two reasons. One is based on equilibrium and other is based on compatibility or continuity. And obviously this occurs when the displacement of a structure are large enough to affect one or both of the following. If the displacements are small, both of these conditions of geometric nonlinearity will not occur, and maybe there is no need to account for that. But if the displacements are large, they may affect either the equilibrium relationships or the compatibility relationships. When the displacements are large, the equilibrium in the deformed position may be significantly different from that in the undeformed position. If you apply the equilibrium equation in the original undeformed configuration and on the deformed configuration where the point of application of forces and all the geometry is modified now, the locations are modified, the equilibrium equation will also be modified if you account for that deformation. So if that effect is significant, then we can say that the effect of geometric nonlinearity should be considered. Or second thing is that the relationship between element deformations and element and displacements may be significantly nonlinear. And I will explain that maybe next slide. First, consider equilibrium and then compatibility. Here I have a column which has a pin support here and which has one free end, and that is connected with a spring, and spring is fixed from that end. Now let's say that it is subjected to both horizontal force H as well as a vertical force P, and this is the undeformed position. If we apply the equilibrium equation in this on this in this diagram, we will simply say that summation f of x is equal to 0, which simply tells us that the force in the spring is equal to H and force in this rod is equal to P, because f of x and f of y are 0. Now let's consider the deformed position due to the same applied loading of this structure. Now it will displace because of H and P. Now the forces are still applied at that end, which is free end. And now if I apply the equilibrium equation, we will see that the force in spring will be now H plus P into delta over H. Now the force in the spring is also the function of displacement of that free end. Previously it was not the function. So force in the spring will be not simply H, but H plus P into delta over H. You can derive this expression using simple equilibrium applied to this deformed shape. Now the idea is that here when you double the applied force, the internal forces are also doubled. If you double the horizontal force, the force in the spring will also be doubled simply because H will be replaced by 2H now. Similarly, if you double the applied force P, the force in the rod will also become 2P if you apply equilibrium on undeformed position. So it's a linear problem. Doubling the force, applied force is basically doubling the response. But here, if you increase H to 2H, the force in the spring is not simply doubled, because now it is dependent on delta also, this deformation also. So multiplying H with 2 will simply will not increase this force in spring to 2 times. And what is this, you can say, symptom? This is symptom of nonlinearity, that you apply a factor to applied force and the response doesn't increase by the same factor. So it means that now if you apply the equilibrium to deformed position, it becomes a nonlinear problem because the internal forces are not increasing with the same factor which you are applying to applied loading. So in the A figure, we are not considering the geometric nonlinearity, but in the B figure, we are considering the geometric nonlinearity because we are applying equilibrium in the deformed configuration of the structure and not in the undeformed configuration of the structure. So if the deformations are small in our real structure, maybe this kind of an analysis is okay. But if we are expecting large deformations which may affect the response also, if the geometry is modified such that it start affecting the response, then we should go for this kind of an analysis. Or we should, in other words, we should consider geometric nonlinearity. So if in the case B, the idea is that if P and H are doubled, the force in the spring is more than doubles. So therefore, you should actually consider in this case when the deformations are significant. So that was the first aspect where the large deformations can affect your calculations in a nonlinear way. The second aspect is compatibility, and the compatibility or continuity simply means that the relationship between the element level deformation and the deformation at the end of that element, that relationship becomes nonlinear. For example, there is a geometrical relationship between the displacements of a structure and the deformation of its components. You know, in the finite element analysis, all the displacements are calculated at nodes, and nodes are usually at the ends of certain elements. These displacements, which are calculated at the end of the elements, at you can say the deformation at the ends, they have a certain relationship between the deformation of the whole element itself. For example, if I move move this point from here to here, and if I assume that there is a deformation delta here, actually I have to basically assume that there is a certain extension in the bar. That's why this point is moved, simply it translated into this increased or modified position or imposed displacement delta. So the top of the bar moves horizontally. Hence the bar must extend to maintain continuity. If I have to just simply assume that delta is a translational displacement, then the bar must extend also in order to keep that new point, because we know the real structure, a real bar will simply rotate and it will not extend. So the new actual point will be somewhere here. But we don't do this in our analysis. We assume that the point simply translated with a delta, this delta. So it means that the actual bar must extend to maintain that assumption or maintain that continuity. And that extension is actually non-linear when you plot it with delta. The more the delta is, the more the bar should extend. We know this. But the relationship between bar extension and delta is not linear for a real rod or for a real element. So which means that this is called compatibility relationship or continuity relationship. The relationship between the deformation within the element and the end displacement. This relationship between bar extension in this case and delta. That relationship is not linear. It is you can say direct relationship, but it is a non-linear relationship. And this is also one reason of one cause of geometric nonlinearity, because the actual relationship, if we consider this relationship, it will make all of our calculations nonlinear. So the deformed length, because of the translational delta, will be now this one. It will become a right triangle, and then you can calculate the length of this dotted line. So now you have a modified length which has a square in it and then a square root, you know that, and therefore all the calculations will become nonlinear. So the bar extension is the deformed length minus the undeformed length. The actual bar extension is actually this deformed length, and then if I subtract the original h from this will become the extension of the bar. And the relationship between delta and the bar extension, which is h square plus delta square under root minus h, the relationship between these two quantities, you can see that it is nonlinear. So for a very small horizontal displacement, the bar extension will be very small. You can just neglect it. But for large displacements, the bar extends with a nonlinear relationship between displacement and extension. So if you don't consider the actual modified geometry, but you still consider that delta, the relationship between bar extension and delta will be nonlinear. Compatibility relationships will be actually nonlinear. So there can be three analysis types considering equilibrium and compatibility. One is one extreme, and that is called small displacement analysis. And that is that you just simply consider the equilibrium in the undeformed position, and for compatibility the displacements are assumed to be vanishingly small. You don't assume that the bar have actually extended. So therefore there is no point of actually using a nonlinear relationship as a compatibility relationship. And also you apply the equilibrium in the undeformed condition, which means that you just use this case. This is the first option, that the equilibrium is in undeformed position and compatibility, and for compatibility the displacements are assumed to be vanishingly small. So there is no point of doing all that, considering actual shape and actual bar extension and everything. And if you don't do anything about geometric nonlinearity, you are doing this option, small displacement analysis. But if you want to actually consider geometric nonlinearity, you have two options. One is called the true large displacement analysis, and second is called the p delta analysis. True large displacement analysis is the other extreme of the small displacement analysis. That in this large displacement analysis, not only that we consider the equilibrium in the deformed position, we also use the nonlinear compatibility relationships, the actual compatibility relationships. So there are no approximations. The geometric nonlinearity is considered explicitly in true large displacement analysis. Both equilibrium and compatibility relationships are nonlinear in this case. And obviously it will be very detailed analysis, and not all structures may require this analysis. If the structure is very flexible, for example a cable structure, for example, which may have large displacements, large enough to actually modify the response, then you may go for this option, second option. But in between these two extremes, there is a practical solution also, and that is called p delta analysis. And in that, the equilibrium is considered in the deformed position with some minor assumptions, and the compatibility relationships are assumed to be linear. So it means that you are somehow considering the geometric nonlinearity approximately. So you are making some approximation and not considering it explicitly, but it is a practical solution, and without performing the actual large displacement analysis, you can capture the effect of geometric nonlinearity. There is a fourth type also, deformed position for equilibrium and small displacement for compatibility, but that is not commonly used. The most commonly used analysis is for geometric nonlinearity. It is p delta analysis, and if you don't consider it, you are actually carrying out the small displacement analysis. So I will quickly explain these three analysis types by using the same example. This example is taken from Graham H. Powell book. So please note down this name and check his book on nonlinear modeling, and this example is taken from there. Let's say that we have an axially rigid bar and it is subjected to P and H. It is also it is also connected with a spring here, the free end. So small displacement analysis will predict these results. It will simply say that the force in spring is H, force in bar is P. This is what you will get as a result if you apply small displacement analysis. Equilibrium in undeformed condition, and the compatibility, for compatibility you assume that there are no, for example, you can say the displacement are small enough to ignore that. On the other extreme, we are considering the actual deformed shape now in the large displacement analysis. So what we do is that here is the original point. Now because of the application of force, the point moves. It not only goes on the right hand side, it also goes down also, and we will consider that also because we are considering the actual deformed shape. Now apply the equilibrium in these deformed shape with the modified locations of P and H, with modified moment arms and everything. You will get the force in spring, this one, and force in the bar, this one. So they are modified now from the small displacement analysis when you have actually considered the theta angle is the angle of rotation at the base. So this is a pin support, so this will simply rotate, and theta is that rotation. In between these two extremes is the p delta analysis, and that is that you consider the equilibrium in deformed shape but you assume that the deformations are negligibly small. So if you simply say that instead of simply rotating the original point and going down also, you will simply say that it is translated into a new position. Translated into a new position. So in a sense, you are not actually using the deformed shape, you are using its, you can say, approximated deformed shape. And you are saying that the effect of that approximation is negligible. So you are allowed to do that. With this assumption, if you carry out the analysis, you apply the equilibrium equation, you will get the force in spring this much, H plus P delta over H. There will be no role of theta in this case, and the force in the bar will be P over cos theta. If you carry out the equilibrium in deformed location, but you still don't use the exact deformed shape, you simply say that this point have translated into this new position, and the level of H have not reduced to this new point which is down compared to the original point. So which means that this P delta analysis is somewhere in between small displacement and large displacement analysis. So now let's quickly see the force in spring and force in bar, how they are modified by these three different analysis procedures. This is the summary, that equilibrium is considered in undeformed position in small displacement analysis, and all of the other two we assume that the equilibrium is considered in the deformed position. We consider it in the deformed position. In P delta we have some minor approximations also. For example, we assume that it's simply translated at the same level to a new point. But here we actually rotated the rod and uh, assume it to a new point. So it moves in an arc. In compatibility relationship, we use linear in both cases but non-linear for the large displacement analysis. And if we do this thing, we are actually ignoring the geometric nonlinearity. If we are doing this thing, we are actually explicitly considering it. So this is explicit consideration. But if we are doing this thing, we are kind of approximately considering the geometric nonlinearity. And in most of the practical cases, this is, you can say, the most practical solution to account for geometric nonlinearity. It will not take much time as compared to large displacement analysis, and it will give the results which are of comparable accuracy to large displacement analysis. So just quickly see that how P and H basically are modifying the force in spring and force in rod by these three different analysis procedures. So when P is 0 and the structure is only applied with the horizontal force, and let's say that we apply a 10% roof drift as our lateral delta, all three methods, the force in the spring is H and the force in the bar is 0 in this case. The only difference is that the vertical displacement is negligible for small displacement and P delta, and equal to a very small value for large displacement. So here, if I go back, the true large displacement analysis will also predict the vertical deformation also of this point. Other two will not have any vertical deformation in the analysis. But apart from this difference, if P is equal to 0, the axial force, the vertical force P is 0, in that case all three of them will have the same analysis result. The force in the spring will be same, equal to H for all of the three analyses. So you can put P equal to 0 in all of the three here, P equal to 0, here P also equal to 0, and here there is no P in the force in the spring. So force in the spring will be H, H and H for all the three cases if there is no vertical force. But if there is significant vertical force, these force in spring will be significantly different. And it means that the geometric nonlinearity effect will become significant if there are very high gravity loads on your structure. So here you can see if P over H is 5, which means the axial force, vertical force is 5 times of the horizontal force for the same deformation level. You will see that P delta case will predict that the forces are 1.5 H and 0.995 P in the spring and in the axial rod. So this is in the spring and the other one is in the rod. And large displacement analysis, the force in the spring will be 1.5 H. And if you perform small displacement analysis, you will get the spring force as equal to H. So which means that considering the geometric nonlinearity in this case, where the axial force was significantly higher compared to horizontal force, considering it will alter or will affect your results also. So there is a factor of 1.5 from small displacement analysis to P delta analysis. But now compare the results between P delta and large displacement. They are very close to each other, which means that if you want to actually consider the geometric nonlinearity, most of the time the P delta analysis will work and will do your job. And you may not go for that detailed large displacement analysis. So here you have 1.5 spring force. The actual large displacement analysis predicted 1.503. In the rod you have 0.995 P. Here you have 0.995 P. So the vertical displacements are essentially the same as for P equal to 0. So these examples show that small displacement analysis may not be an accurate analysis procedure for cases where there are large gravity loads and where there are significant horizontal forces such that the deformations start modifying the response also. So you have seen here that there was an error of 50% in the spring force if you use small displacement analysis or P delta analysis. So P delta analysis is the most practical, you can say, method to account the geometric nonlinearity, and it is almost always accurate enough. Only for very flexible structures such as cable structures, it is necessary to use the large displacement analysis. P delta obviously is more computationally efficient also compared to large displacement analysis. It may take, the large displacement analysis may take significant time. So for most structures, it is a waste of computer time to account for large displacements. And here there is a difference between P capital delta and P small delta also. The capital delta is the nodal displacement. The small delta is the displacement along the element itself. So when you are not considering, for example, just take this case of a cantilever column which is subjected to P and H. When you are not considering P delta effect, you will get simply this bending moment diagram. A triangular bending moment diagram, and the base moment will be horizontal force times this height. When you consider the P capital delta, you will have an additional moment, secondary moment, which is equal to P into capital delta, and that will be obviously a linear relationship, this bending moment diagram. The small p delta contribution is along the member itself, and this is due to the member deformation also itself. Because when you are using actually the nodal displacement, you are not considering the element deformation at each level also. In small p delta analysis, you are also considering the element deformation along the length. And if you consider that, you may get a slightly modified bending moment diagram, and the body that difference will actually be due to P small delta contribution. So the P delta effect at the element level becomes P small delta, but at the nodal displacement level it is capital P delta. So this small difference is due to considering the element level deformation also along its different heights. So if you consider that also, you will get this bending moment diagram. If you simply consider the the node level deformation equal to capital delta, and simply plot along the height with a linear line, you will get this line, which is the P capital delta contribution. And if you don't consider that effect, you will simply get the small displacement contribution. So this is the small displacement contribution. So again, depending upon the values of P and delta, these contributions can be significant or may not be significant also. So the large stress and large displacement effects are called geometric nonlinearity as distinguished from material nonlinearity. It is also sometimes called as kinematic nonlinearity or second order geometric effects. So you have three options. Don't consider it at all. That may be wrong in some cases. Consider it explicitly with large displacement analysis, and consider it approximately using P delta analysis. So unlike the material nonlinearity, which may not be well understood, for example, material failure, there is no single theory which materials may follow. Each material exhibits a different behavior. Material nonlinearity is difficult to actually account in the nonlinear analysis. But geometric nonlinearity is well calculated, is a well-defined mathematical theory. We have seen in that free body in the diagram also. If I go back, if you carry out that analysis, either P delta or true nonlinear large displacement, it is well defined. All the equilibrium equations can be developed for deformed shapes. The compatibility nonlinearity relationships can be included in that. So it is well defined, and it is mathematically a unified theory, unlike the material nonlinearity where each material may exhibit a different behavior, and then we carry out tests, and test results will be different for different elements, and then we have to approximately account them in computer modeling. Here we just have to, if you are using a commercial software package, you just have to just check one option that includes geometric nonlinearity using P delta analysis or using large displacement analysis. And it will do it for you because the underlying mathematics is already worked out. It has well defined causes, and it is governed by clear mathematical rules. So geometrical nonlinearity is not subject to any judgment or interpretation, unlike material nonlinearity where it is subjected to judgment and interpretation, because you will carry out a particular test results will be idealized, and those idealized results will be then modeled in a computer program. So our knowledge of material nonlinearity depends almost entirely on what we observe in experiments on actual structures. But this is not the case with geometric nonlinearity. It is well defined, mathematical formulation is available which we can use and calculate the response. But this doesn't mean that geometric nonlinearity is easy to account. It can be complex also, and sometimes in some cases there may be some convergence issues also with the analysis model. So I have a separate lecture series on finite element modeling, and in one of the lectures, I think here this one, maybe this one, I have discussed this geometric nonlinearity in a bit more detail. You may refer to that lecture also if you want to understand that thing. And there I give an example from ETABS and SAP also, I think. The third type of nonlinearity is the boundary nonlinearity, and it is due to the nonlinear contact conditions. For example, constraints or restraints which are applied to your structure may have nonlinear behavior. For example, which allows some parts or portions of the same part to touch or lift. These kind of, for example, behaviors, and certain systems may be interacting. For example, one, you can say, contact problems or impact problems where one object is hitting your structure, the area of contact is modified at each time instant. All of those special kind of behavior may be captured using boundary nonlinearity. So for example, some specific loading types also may be displacement or velocity based, or they may also be fluctuating with nonlinear relationship. So these are three different types of nonlinearities. Material nonlinearity, which is because of the nonlinear behavior exhibited at material level. We account that using nonlinear stress-strain relationships of different materials, and that relationship we actually obtain from test results. And second is the geometric nonlinearity. It is due to the change in the geometry of the structure, and if that change is such that it modifies your equilibrium or compatibility relationships, then it becomes nonlinear problem. The third is the boundary conditions nonlinearity, where the actual boundary conditions may sometimes be nonlinear. That is a very special case. So some important considerations. Nonlinear analysis takes time and patience. Uh, it is difficult, and you should start with simple problem, maybe some linear analysis, modal analysis first, and then include the nonlinear components in your structure, and then perform finally the nonlinear analysis. Always use p delta analysis because it is computationally more efficient compared to large displacement analysis. So now coming back to the stiffness part of our structure, let me conclude our lecture to this with this discussion that the stiffness of the structure itself will be modified when you perform nonlinear modeling. It will become variable. If you think of a structure as a linear spring, it may be represented by a spring with some stiffness K applied with some applied force F, and it is governed by this simple static equilibrium equation. F is equal to Ku. And K is constant in this case, in case of linear spring case, but it will not be constant in nonlinear problem. So if you have a linear problem, this Ku will be constant. So F will be always equal to Ku. For nonlinear problem, F will not be equal to Ku, it will deviate from Ku. So the difference between F, the actual F and the linear Ku will be the nonlinear force, and in the linear case this will become the equilibrium equation for nonlinear structure. The Ku, which is this point, minus F nonlinear, if you just subtract this difference, you will get the actual F, which is on red line. Now the point is how to calculate this F nonlinear. This is where the iterative part of the procedure comes in. The computer program actually have to calculate this F nonlinear iteratively. It starts the solution with linear approximation, but then it assumes some F nonlinear and brings the solution down. Then again it starts linear approximation and then brings the solution down. And the target and the iterations will continue until you reach to that red line at each point on the of the analysis. So generally computer programs use modified Newton-Raphson method to achieve this convergence, to actually calculate this F nonlinear and calculate this response of this red line. If you are performing nonlinear dynamic analysis, then this will become your detailed, you can say, equilibrium equation, where you have this part, which is actually the true nonlinear force. So you actually have to add it. In fact, it will subtract actually, but here you can just simply write it as plus FNL. So this is the actual F on the red line, on the nonlinear line. This is the nonlinearity accounted only in the stiffness of the structure. There can be some other kinds of nonlinearity also. So the behavior are primarily of four types. Linear elastic, which means that it follows straight line, come back on the same straight line. Linear inelastic goes to a certain point with a straight line come back with a straight line, but not exactly at that point from which it started. It is linear inelastic. Then non-linear elastic, which means doesn't follow straight line, but comes back to the same point. There are certain metals, for example, shape memory alloys, some rubber materials which follow this kind of a behavior. And lastly, non-linear inelastic material doesn't follow a straight line while loading and also doesn't follow while unloading and doesn't come back to the original position. Most of the inelastic material follow this kind of a behavior, the real inelastic behavior. If you classify analysis types based on excitation, the structural behavior and response, you may come up with all of these combinations. For example, the excitation is applied, force is applied in a static manner, the structure is expected to behave elastically, response remains in the linear range, so it will become linear elastic static analysis. And on the other extreme, you have dynamic inelastic nonlinear analysis. This is the true nonlinear dynamic analysis. In between also you may have different types. For example, this one is the nonlinear inelastic static analysis, nonlinear static procedure or the pushover analysis, or this one is the simple linear static procedure. So depending upon the structural behavior, the analysis type will be different. These three which I have just highlighted, they are most commonly used. But obviously, if for example your structure is exhibiting this linear inelastic behavior and you perform static analysis on that, it will become this third kind of analysis. But actually, we have this combination linear static procedure, generally used for design of new buildings, then nonlinear static, and then nonlinear dynamic. So the basic equilibrium equations for all of these analysis procedures are listed down here. Linear static follows F is equal to Ku. Linear dynamic follows this equation. You are already familiar with that. Nonlinear static have this equation and nonlinear dynamic have this detailed equation. These F nonlinear is not known. This is very important point. It is not known at the start. It is calculated uh, based on analysis iterations. So therefore, nonlinear analysis, static or dynamic, takes significant amount of time compared to linear analysis because they are iterative, because they have something in their equation which is not known at start, and the program has to run again and again to actually know that quantity. So this is the most comprehensive equilibrium equation for nonlinear dynamic analysis. It covers everything. If you ignore these two things, it will become nonlinear static analysis. If you consider this, if you ignore this quantity, it will become linear analysis. So it considers everything, linear, nonlinear, static, dynamic, everything. So this is the most comprehensive equation. It can handle anything. It has the stiffness displacement part. Previously we were calling it as the elastic restoring force part, but now since we know that it may not always be elastic, it may be nonlinear also, so we just call it as stiffness displacement part. Mass acceleration and damping velocity and the applied external force. So the basic variables, we know that it is u and its derivatives, displacement and its derivatives. Displacement is then used again to calculate internal forces also.